let me just be clear. I got into Harvard only because of affirmative action. But someone came to Denver, Colorado to look for me. A Harvard recruiter flew to Denver, and I met up with her at the Village Inn restaurant and did a pre-interview to get to pull me into Harvard. I was pulled in. The first week or two that I was in class, my presence was questioned by white people. I was in this big conference class where some white students stood up and said, those students, the black students, they're only here because of affirmative action. It became a huge argument that we all ended up having. This was freshman year. I had never had my academic credentials questioned. I had never had anyone question whether I was intelligent until I got to Harvard. And it was a defining point of my experience there. It's why I really was one of the many reasons I was miserable there my freshman year.
I love that. I don't know. Every part of that makes me laugh because Joy Ann Reid admits she only got into Harvard because she's black, but she's so stupid that she didn't realize she was admitting that she only got into Harvard because she was black and not because she was smart enough. And then she got there and talks about how she got made fun of for being stupid. Joy, you're stupid. I'm stupid. I know what it's like, but I at least realize it. Joining me now, Tudor Dixon of the Tudor Dixon podcast. Tudor, we got a nice win at the Supreme Court level last week saying you probably shouldn't just allow people into college because they're black. It's a good time for the country.
But Joy Reid makes the point that so many conservative black people came out and said was, hey, I didn't want to be seen as just someone that got here because I was chosen to check a box. I want to be seen that I'm here because of merit. And let's not forget that the people who brought that case to the Supreme Court, many of them are Asian Americans who said we are being unfairly discriminated against and kicked out of our spot to make room for someone else who didn't work as hard as we did. And we want to make sure that we have that opportunity. So this idea that this is in some way taking it away from someone else, it is really a merit-based program now. And it was the Supreme Court that came down and said this was not something constitutional and this is not where we're going to go as a country.
Those daggone Asians and their good grades. You know, that actually brings up a good point, Tudor, about taking something away. Why do people have such a hard time admitting, so many people, that they like their handouts? They like their giveaways. No one seems to want to admit this. Joy Ann Reid and her despicable brand of communism, they like that they get into better schools for the color of their skin. They can't come out and admit that, but they enjoy it.
But the real question is, why aren't they concerned about the students that don't have the opportunity because it happens way earlier in life? Why aren't they talking about, wait a minute, why do we have a 5% reading proficiency in Detroit public schools? Why don't those kids have the opportunity? It's not because the colleges aren't looking at them. It's because something is going really wrong in public education at a very young age. And that's what is concerning to me. Let's look a little bit further back and say, let's teach kids to read. Let's make sure they have the opportunity and then they can compete in this merit-based program.
Tudor, we got another student loan win last week. Supreme Court decided that Joe Biden's clearly unconstitutional student loan forgiveness was unconstitutional. This was all just a setup so Democrats can run on this in the election, though, right?
Yeah, I'm going to argue that it is not a win at all. I'm going to say, look, this is very reminiscent of the Dobbs decision where Republicans came out and they were like, oh, great, this is a huge win, and then had no idea what was actually going to happen. So let's look at what we're looking at right now, truly, with Joe Biden, who is coming out and saying, look to me, once again, I will be your savior. I'm going to go a different direction and make sure you get this money back. Because let's face it, Joe Biden doesn't give two hoots if you don't have to pay your student loan. It really isn't about that. He prefers to not have to pay your student loan for you. He prefers to not get the money back to you. He wants to make sure that he wins. He wants to make sure that Democrats win. So they are going to use this across the country. Dems across the country will run on this. This radical Supreme Court, they're doing this against us, our will. We're going to take them down and we're going to fight for you. This is going to be the message, and it's going to resonate with young people. They love that this happened. This is the best thing that could happen to Democrats.
We're going to win in 24?
If we do not start to change the way we talk to people, it's going to be a problem. And I sincerely mean that. They have these commercials that are going out. They're meeting people where they are. We talk about not being on TikTok. Well, that gives them they're the only people on TikTok talking to young people. They are getting their messages out every possible way. And Republicans are sitting back and saying, let's have a rally. Let's look at the pictures and see how many people showed up. A rally is not going to do it, folks. You got to get the message directly to the people, and that's what the Dems are doing.
I've tried to explain this to people 1,000 times, Tudor, that they're blocking and tackling, and we're talking about how many people show up at rallies. They're getting out the vote, they're ballot harvesting, they're out there reaching people, and we have a rally and say, look how many people did it, we're going to win. Do we learn nothing from last election?
If I watch on social media, I see people nipping at each other. My candidate has more people coming than your candidate. And I'm thinking, what are you doing to actually get the message out? And when are you going to start talking about the economy and national security and the border and protecting the country against the Chinese coming in and taking over our land? I mean, these are serious issues that people are very concerned about. And I am not seeing those discussed. I'm seeing these people go at each other on social media, whereas the Dems are not going at each other in social media. They're going to the voters and they're saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take care of you. We love the fact that you went to college and we don't think you should have to pay for it. We're going to make sure you don't have to. We're going to make sure you have unlimited choices in your life. We need to get into that space, and I don't see us there yet.
What happened with this Michigan appeals court in Governor Ratchet?
So the governor, obviously, maybe some of your listeners or viewers remember that Michigan had very severe lockdowns during COVID and restaurants were locked down. Restaurants were locked down from April to June. Then they were locked down again in the fall. Then they were locked down again after Christmas. We had the longest restaurant lockdowns of any state in the entire country. So Gretchen Whitmer's powers were taken away from her at some point because the Michigan Supreme Court came in and said, actually, you don't have the power to do this. She transferred that power over to the health department, and then they locked down the restaurants. And it turns out now we're finding out that was also illegal. This is no surprise because this is, similar to the student loan situation. Joe Biden's like, you know what, forget about the courts. I'm going to do this anyway. Gretchen Whitmer the same, and it looks like she wants to be in Joe Biden's seat. So she is willing to say, forget about the courts. I'll figure out another way to get my way and do whatever I want.
You have come on here before and said that Ratchet is running for president, and I believe you. You know her a lot more intimately than I do. But how does this work? What would you think? You see Joe resigning? Game this out for me.
No, I believe that there is, we've seen some of these candidates, these Democrat candidates positioning themselves. You've seen Newsom put out his video. You see Gretchen Whitmer launching her federal PAC now. And so I believe that they will wait until the very end. They don't want the arrows against their candidates. They don't want the news saying, oh, let's interview them. Let's put them in the spotlight. They want to make sure that Joe Biden is running as long as possible because in addition to not having arrows against their candidates, if they were to take Joe Biden out now and say, you know, he's just not healthy enough to do this, they would have to lift up Kamala Harris. And they certainly don't want to do that. So why not wait until the general, take them both out just as we get through the primary and then slide a Whitmer ticket in there. And she has been able to really be built up on the Democrat side. She's had this puff piece in the Atlantic, this puff piece from Vanity Fair recently. Everybody's talking about her new PAC. She's definitely a golden child on the Democrat side, and I believe that they could easily put her in that position.
Tudor, there's a real mystery out there. Somebody found some booger sugar in the White House, and the authorities can't seem to find who it was. Do you have any guesses who that might have been?
Well, I think that everybody has the obvious guess. A certain former crack addict is visiting the White House quite often these days.
Former.
But to be, yes, former, maybe not so former. Maybe we're finding out not so former. But I also think that we have a very interesting and diverse group of people in the White House who have had some serious issues in their lives, and they are potentially also bringing cocaine into places where they are working. It could really be anybody when you look at what's happening in D.C. right now. It is such a mess. And the fact that this is trying to be swept under the rug, I think it's so important for us to say, no. We really want to know what's happening. And if this is a Hunter Biden situation, again, my goodness, at what point are we finally going to say this man needs to be investigated for his crimes, which are multiple, and potentially even for treason or betraying his own country?
Yeah, I'm sure the DOJ will be all over that. Thanks, Tudor. Come back soon.
Thank you.